Yeah, and I think that's just the nature of being a red teamer. You have to be jack of all trades, master of none, you know? And could I build a Azure, AWS, and GCP environment? Yeah, 100%. Would it be worth the crap? Probably not. Could I myself get hacked doing it? Probably. So, it definitely gives you that empathy to think about these cloud admins that have to do that, right? Because there are some that are like multi-cloud, having to think about all 2 or 3 or 4 platforms and how to engineer, architect, and secure. So, yeah, I mean, I feel for them. I just have to be right once, they have to be right every single time.
This is Hackers to Founders, a podcast about cybersecurity professionals who have reached the pinnacle of their cybersecurity expertise and have ventured into new frontiers, whether it's launching innovative startups or making impactful investments in our industry. My name is Chris Magistrado, and I'm a vulnerability researcher best known for traveling and meeting hackers from all around the world. And I'm using what little extrovert skills I have to introduce to you hackers that are changing the world. All right, and welcome to today's episode of Hackers to Founders. My name is Chris Magistrado, and today we're joined with Marcus Sailler. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with a seasoned expert whose career has shaped the forefront of cybersecurity and information technology. He brings over 25 years of experience in IT, cybersecurity, and risk management. Marcus' journey began in the U.S. Army, where he honed his leadership skills. His career has since spanned pivotal roles in renowned organizations like Capital Group, and he now leads the global head of Red Team at MUFG. Is it pronounced MUFG and not MUFG?
I hope so, because I've been saying it wrong if not.
Okay, all right. Throughout his career, Marcus has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to advancing security practices, mentoring the next generation of professionals, and ensuring robust defenses against ever-evolving threats. His insights and leadership not only strengthen organizational resilience, but have also contributed significantly to the broader cybersecurity community. Please join me in welcoming Marcus Sailler to Hackers to Founders. Welcome to the show.
Cool. Thank you. Honored to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. So I want to open up with something that you said in a previous episode with, I think it was Thomas Richards' interview. You mentioned that you had a CISO mentor and you had written something. I think it was one of your reports. And then you're like, I wrote this. And he's like, yeah, but who cares? And it was something... did you remember that specific incident or?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's something that red teamers early on often fall kind of victim to or fall into a trap of. They get so focused on the technical components of what they find, they don't really draw the conclusion of why it matters, right? And so I think what the exercise was him trying to get me to understand the business impact, right? So. And by the way, his name is Mike Catlin. He's retired CISO. He's like an Iron Man, freaking triathlete god out there still doing. He's like in his late 60s, still doing triathlons and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I think the way that he kind of what often kind of challenged me is, yeah, that's cool, but that's really neat that you can do that, but who cares? What is the business impact? What is the reality of what happens when this happens? And, to me, that was a very good learning experience early on that I've always tried to teach others, is that if you can't relate to the person that you're telling, especially at a senior and executive level, as to what the real issue is, it's just noise. And they're either not going to care or they're just not going to understand it. And you don't have any allyship to get it fixed.
Actually, so I have that question in terms of interviewing and stuff, because sometimes when I'll go into the interview, they'll ask something like, okay, so what's the most important, asset in the network or, in this situation, right? I never immediately answer, and I'll ask them, I'm like, well, I ask more about the business approach, thinking well, which ones are more if certain things go down, does that affect what areas of the business? Is it better to ask those types of questions, or is it better to just kind of initially answer in interviews like these?
I think it really depends on the interviewer. To me, you get these interviewers who are looking for this philosophical answer and this approach, and then
sure.
Sometimes you get the interviewer that's asking for the technical approach, and it's really kind of hard. You kind of balance and kind of guess which one. From a philosophical approach, I think you're spot on, which is kind of asking more questions and being intellectually curious. But from a technical approach, it'd be something witty like, oh, it's the asset you don't know about, or, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think interviews should be, at least the interviews that I like to have or conduct, they should be interactive, right? So it shouldn't just be a quick fire answer. It really should be a discussion. It should be you feeling each other out. Like, is this guy a psychopath, and do I want him to work for me, right? But on the candidate side, it's also like, will I hate my boss? Is this guy horrible, right? So it should be kind of both ways.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because like as a recruiter, like I feel it's I feel like we're the front lines of like determining if they're crazy or not. Because like
Right.
obviously in like a 10-minute conversation while we're talking, if you're talking about like burning down the place or how much you're so anti-establishment and like, okay, I'm sending you to like a Fortune 100, like that's not going to work out or something.
Mm-hmm.
These little things. Yeah, so that's interesting. So like when you're conducting interviews, what are some things that candidates have said that have like impressed you?
That have impressed me.
Or just like shocked you, whatever. Either maybe there's more memorable.
I think so. I maybe not necessarily, to your point, like some of the recruiters filter some of these out.
Hopefully.
So like some of the crazy ones that we get, especially in a hybrid environment in this day and age when remote is a viable option for, red teamers and InfoSec professionals, we get some that just belligerently hate the idea of going into the offices. And it's like, well, why did you apply? Like, it clearly says that. But, we get these crazy folks that are like, you're never going to find anyone and good luck. And I'm like, well, okay, well, you didn't make it past the first round. So
yeah.
Thanks for filtering yourself out. But in terms of impressed, I think to me, it's pretty easy at the senior level to have somebody like highly technical and have that acumen. But to me, it's the early career folks that kind of have that higher potential to impress. When somebody's fresh out of college and they talk to you about this social engineering project they had in school where they were able to social engineer the football team into giving him a press pass to go sit on the floor of a major school, like an Ivy level school, during a huge football game where the tickets were sold out. Like that to me, I was like, wow, you social engineered your way to getting a ticket to a football game. Like, and not even, he wasn't even asked. Like nobody even gave him that direction. It was just an idea he had, and he was able to do it. So stuff like that is pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, and I definitely want to take the moment to say, like, if you're in school or if you're in college or you're doing projects and stuff like that, it's 100% viable to utilize your experience, even if it's not technically work experience. You can put that on your resume and you can include that. A lot of people don't, or you feel scared to. Please do, because like you just said, like those are real world examples where you're able to show your experience and it transfers over to the work experience.
Yeah, 100%.
So thank you for that. Okay, so. Upon all of the podcasts and other things I was like researching you on, I couldn't find anything about your history of where you came to be. I know that you were in the Army. You were born and then immediately joined the Army, and then you got into Unix administrative work, and then additionally was learning security, it seemed, at that position, and then you jumped all the way up to like lead in like a company, and then it's been financial institution after financial institution is looking like the path. But I don't know what happened when you were 5, and like, were you playing around during the time war dialing, or what was going on in the time? Were you on the forums?
Yeah, so I guess my dad we can go really way back. My dad got me my first computer at 6.
Okay, cool.
And now, like, obviously that's not a big deal, but in the 80s, late 80s, like,
they're expensive, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it was a Tandy 1000 8086, and it was like $3,000 or something like that. And
what did your dad do to be able to afford it?
I've struggled to understand, because he was working in the oil field and like not making a whole lot of money. So retrospectively, I look at it as like, man, that must have been, he probably financed that like a vehicle, like that was a car payment probably for about 3 years. But yeah, and the second that he brought it home, I was just immediately fascinated by it. I wanted to break it and tear it apart and put it back together and learn, QBasic and DOS and all these things. And really, initially, it was just motivated towards playing games. Like, how do I do this to play a video game? And it kind of grew from there. And, this is something that I always look for in interviews as well, as that intellectual curiosity kind of peaked probably at about 10. And this is a time when, like, it wasn't really a big deal or it wasn't a thing to actually get an IT job or be in IT. Like, it was pretty out of reach, especially for where I come from. And so, I spent a lot of time on it. I just remember my dad telling me, like, what are you doing? You're just wasting time. And little did I know that it was literally me building my career at the age of, 10 or 11. And then, like every misfortunate youth, I started on the forums. I started on the war dialing, started getting in trouble and doing things I wasn't supposed to. And, I was lucky that I was young. And back then, people just didn't really know how to handle hacking. Like, what is it? The Computer Act of 1992 had just come out, and like local law enforcement never saw or even heard of hackers, let alone, what to do with them and how to treat them. So, yeah, right. I mean, it kind of pushed me on the path to think about, how computers can be used as a tool, whether you use it for good or bad is really kind of up to the individual. And then, like you said, I literally was born and then joined the Army. So out of high school.
How did that happen? Like, what was the inspiration for joining the military? At the time.
Yeah, so I had a cousin who was a radio operator, and he was telling me he later got out and was like working for Sun Microsystems, which is now Oracle. But I was just really, because he knew I was into computers and fascinated, and he knew I got in trouble, and he was like, "You should join the Army, and you should take this particular job." And I was like 16. When I started doing the paperwork, and my parents had to give permission, and I found the job, and I had to go back and forth, and I had some medical issues that I had to get waivers for from playing football, and it happened, and I was like, "Ooh, what did I do?" And so I had a year before I actually had to ship out, because I had to graduate high school first, and that year was like menace to society. Like, I was just getting in trouble, messing up. And I was just kind of like on the path, like I, barely graduate high school, like, just that troubled youth. Right. And then I think right before I left, I got fired from a job that I had been working for like a year that was paying really well. And I was working like full time almost. And it was actually one of the bosses hated me, so he fired me. But anyway, that was the wake-up call. And I was like, I am not going to get into college. I don't have the grades. Intellectual curiosity doesn't mean you get good grades. And so I joined, and I was IT. And I remember, being like the first one, like very, very few of them are out there. And I was the first one at an infantry unit. That was the first duty station that I had. And
did you need a clearance at that time? Did it handle any of the computer tech stuff?
Yeah, so everyone that comes in, and it was funny because, this is when they were still doing SF-86 on floppy disks and paper and all that stuff, and everybody was getting held up at school. So they would go to school and they would finish school, and then they'd be waiting for their clearance. I fortunately somehow, despite my troubled youth, went right through. But yeah, you needed a secret clearance, and then later I needed a TSSCI to work for DISA. So, it just goes to show they give clearances to naughty people as long as you're honest.
Did you tell them okay.
Everything.
Did you? Okay, well, let's explore some of this if it's okay. So, like, how deep were you in trouble? Did you, was the FBI ever called or involved? Did you ever get swatted, raided, anything?
No, it was, probably
should you have been swatted, raided?
In today's society, yeah, I probably would have.
Okay. Were you okay? So, I guess my second question is going to be like, nothing was happening. Were you getting any financial gain? Was it mostly the curiosity stuff that you were interested in learning and stuff, or just kind of finding out that nothing's happening yet?
Yeah, there was definitely no financial motivation towards it. It was just trying to understand how things work and, knocking over systems because you found, on the forums, if you do a certain thing, it does a certain thing. And so it was just trial and error, just playing around, but when you're playing around with other people's, businesses or stuff, like they tend to not like you doing that, as people.
Yeah, generally. Okay. All right. So then, so you learned more in the U.S. military in terms of, I don't know. Can I ask like what you were learning? Are you able to talk about that or no?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a clear job until I got out. Actually, I mean, I basically was doing general IT work, starting from like level 1 PC technician stuff, working all the way up to sysadmin work. Being a Windows sysadmin, Unix sysadmin, I had a mentor in Hawaii when I worked for DISA Pacific. His name was Jay Sheriff, and he was a contractor. I was in the military, and he really just kind of sat down. He was a great teacher. Like he just sat me down and showed me how to do everything Unix, and I was just soaking it up, kind of like I was 10 again. And it just kind of set the tone for what I wanted to do, and kind of that apply some of those skills to pretty much everything and keep those skills sharp everywhere I went.
What version of like Windows were running on these servers?
Back in the day, we were in the NT era, like
Oh, that's scary.
the 3.5, 4.0 NT is what we were administering. And then Solaris, we were on like 2.5, 2.6. So like before they were even giving them whole numbers,
So then afterwards, you joined a government contractor that required a clearance?
Yeah, so I was working in a skiff in Charlottesville, and I got out of the military after being almost 8.5 years, and it just felt like I was still in the military. I wasn't wearing a uniform, but I was basically going to jail for 8 hours a day in a skiff, no cell phone, no internet.
You're telling me you didn't like skiff life?
No. Oh, no. I lasted about 5, maybe 6 months, and I was like, nope, I'm good. And that's when financial services came in. And I pretty much knew when I signed up that, my clear days were over. I was going to let my clearance lapse. I was going to walk away from, any government life pretty much from then on.
And you joined, so this was at Capital Group, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then you joined Capital Group, and like you were there for at least 15, almost 16 years. And like the position that you had was head of offensive security. Did you get that position as soon as you were started, or was it something that like grew?
No, actually, I started as a sysadmin. I was a Unix guy.
Okay. Okay.
And in fact, then I got dual hatted and was doing Windows. We call ourselves Windexers. I do Windows. But yeah, I mean, I kind of started to see the writing on the wall with sysadmin work, and, kind of the cloud was coming, everything else was coming. Sysadmins were not as in high of demand. And when I worked at DISA, I had a little bit of a security admin background. We used to do, the audits and security technical implementation guides, the STIGs. We'd help provide feedback and help provide feedback on how the scripts ran and stuff like that. So I was like, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll go into InfoSec. And then I transitioned. So that transition, to me, it felt like home, because I was doing the things that I liked doing before I joined the military, and I was just getting to do it,
legally and
paid and with ethics,
The ethics are there too, yeah.
Yeah. So, it just kind of became a thing for me. And no, it didn't initially happen right away. I mean, it took me probably 7 to 8 years to get into a leadership role there, just because I was bouncing around, learning as much as I could, helping stand up various programs from vulnerability management, security operations, and then, you start to make all these investments in security. And I raised my hand and had the question, who's testing all this? How do we know this is actually working? And I think that's pretty much what every red teamer should be. That goes to an organization that doesn't have a red team. That's what they should be thinking. It's like, who is validating these investments? Like millions of dollars in security stack, right? Like, is it effective? Is it working? And that's kind of how I started the red team there.
At what point, maybe you can answer this, maybe not, but at what point do you feel like a company should start to evaluate building out a red team? At what stage in the company, and what would that look like for the company to say like, okay, we need to start developing a team?
I think it depends on industry and size, and then just maturity, right? So, if I had started a red team right away, it would have been pointless. You really kind of have to have some maturity on the blue side before you actually red team, because what are you testing? Like if there's no stack, if there's no personnel, if there's no people, process, technology, like you're testing thin air, right? Or it's shooting ducks or shooting fish in a barrel, shooting ducks. So yeah, I mean, I think at that point, startups are a little different. I don't really know that you can make a good case for a red team on a startup. That's probably better for consultant work. Smaller companies as well. I mean, I think you really need to have a good medium to large size organization for that to really be effective internally.
What resources were you learning to like up your game in terms of red teaming at the time? Because it was still pretty early, right?
Yeah. So I, like many people who get started in the field, I went to Black Hat. Right? Okay. And there was a couple of courses that really caught my eye that were red team focused, being taught by this company called Varus Group. And if you know the story of SpecterOps, the founder, the two founders, David McGuire and Jason Frank, the COO, they started at Varus Group. They were teaching that class, and then they got acquisitioned, and then they started their own company. So basically, I had taken the class, did what I did networking wise. I met them, had good conversations, said, hey, I'm starting a red team. I could use some help me with some program development. And, I really credit my career to them because they kind of showed me the path, right? And from there, it just kind of like all open source stuff and like who's doing the coolest new open source, capabilities and C2s and Cobalt Strike. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's like a tool belt, right? You just, every time you see something cool, you put it in your tool belt, you try it out, you hopefully have an environment that's target rich. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you figure out why. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my learning experience. It was mostly just trial and error.
So I have a question about the program development side of stuff, because I think for many people that are strictly just technical, they're like, what the fuck is that? So like, what is a program development? And like, how did you successfully not just learn it, but also implement it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of red teamers, they may just come into a program that's already there and already established. Mm-hmm. But, when you think about program development, it's at the leadership level, it's really kind of just baking in the justification of why you should red team.
Right. So what is that in terms of communication? Like, what's the best way to approach your boss or whoever's in charge to be able to even offer such a service?
Yeah, I mean, to me, like what I've seen the best kind of start path is find something that you can be successful at, like a pen tests, any type of engagement, run it, display the risk, display the issue, take it to your boss, and say, hey, would you like to see more? Kind of like the Starship Troopers ask, And if you can sell them, if they understand the value of you finding issues that keep them up at night, that's where you kind of get your foot in the door. And then you bring in somebody like an expert that actually knows what they're doing, because chances are you don't. And they help you kind of with the structure of it, right? And so to me, building that structure out, making it kind of legitimizing it is what I would say. And then socializing it, because you open your mouth and start telling people, I want to hack the company. Like that immediately freaks people out. And so you really kind of have to build it out in a way or make the business case in a way that it's like, I want to help protect the company, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to hack the company. So, it's just kind of coming up with those problem statements and then reverse engineering the implementation of it is really kind of that program development aspect.
Okay. Now let's say we have somebody who's working at a company. They've gone to DEF CON maybe once or twice. They're learning some skills, and there is an existing red team or existing red team or some type of team that does this type of work in the company, what's a way that they can get the attention to attempt to shift over or at least apply into that general area?
Yeah, this is a tough one because this happens a lot. I don't know how many times I've had people approach me and say they want to do this kind of work. And for me, like I go into observation mode immediately because one, I want to know, do you have the temperament for it? Are you there just to pop shells and embarrass people, right? Because there are red teamers still out there that do that. Do you have the intellectual curiosity? Like, what are you doing? Are you setting up? I know this is so cliche, but are you setting up labs? Are you actually learning the tradecraft? Or are you just talking mess and saying that you want to be something and without actually, putting the work in? And then, so for me, I like to do like rotations and internships. So obviously this requires organizational cooperation, especially if somebody's like at capacity doing their regular job. Like, how are they going to lend some cycles to help out? But really kind of if it's way out in left field in terms of where they're starting, like pen testing is kind of where, you kind of you can safely let them get their feet wet. And then you have pen testers that want to cross over into red team, which I see a lot as well. And I think to me, it's about how can you demonstrate that OPSEC? Do you understand what OPSEC is versus pen test is just, making some noise? Do you understand the telemetry? Do you understand, this being silent and living off the land versus, just hammering away? So, I mean, I think, getting back to your question, like how do people, what's my recommendation for people to cross over? I think it's just being persistent about the conversation, right? And asking for feedback. So because I have people that come and then they don't do anything and I'm like, you haven't demonstrated, you haven't done X, you haven't done Y, and you try to give them resources.
So not just the conversation, but also like demonstrating that they're doing something, like you said, setting up labs, you're taking some courses, you're learning something and some way of showing that, whether it be a blogs or website or something like this.
Yeah. 100%. And then when you think about like how you are more inclusive, like what I did at Capital Group was I created like an internal hacking community. Mm-hmm. And, that's where you kind of like look around, like who's serious about this, and you get an offering like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me or something like that. And you kind of go through demos and like talk to people. And it's to me, it's like recruiting. You give them the tools to be successful and to learn, and then you wait for the cream to rise, right? So who actually takes it serious, who actually works at it? Those are the people that you want to invest your time in to try to get them over. But yeah, that internal hacking community, I mean, it was cool. It was street cred to like, talk about the program and like, get more people aware and involved with, what that program did. But it was also kind of a recruiting training grounds.
Nice. And you mentioned like transferring over from pen testing over to red teaming. And then of course the people way left field that want to go into red teaming, but you recommend that they start in pen testing. What are some of the skill sets that they can demonstrate? Because you mentioned living off the land. How is one able to demonstrate that they like are able to do so? Coming from the pen testing side over to red teaming.
Yeah, to me, it's about understanding the way your attacks work, right? So if you're not just YOLOing your attacks and you don't know the impact of it, like the exercise I like to have people go through is like run this attack that is going to work and then reverse engineer what a defender would do with it. And so it's really kind of putting the lens of the defender in their eyes to help them be more aware of how they can be silent. And then, using those LOLs to kind of blend in, right? And do they understand what those LOLs are doing, right? So, I also like, maybe it's my personal bias, but I also like folks that come from a sysadmin background. Mm-hmm. Because they're the ones that do understand how the OSs work, right? So they understand, the tools that are native to the OS, and they're actually easier to teach red teaming than somebody that's a pen tester who has no like OS background. So yeah, I mean it's a little difficult to treat to teach OPSEC without actually teaching like the defense component of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then do you think like a lot of people that come from like a SOC analyst or SOC engineering position are better suited because they're looking at SIM and looking for like incident of compromises, then they have a better understanding? Or even people that are doing like reverse engineering malware where they're able to like say like, this is exactly how it propagates and like I can easily write YARA rules to be able to defend against it. Do you feel like those people might have a better understanding about how to be more quiet on networks to shift over to being a red team?
Yeah, actually, I think they do, and it happens a lot. I mean, you see it happen both ways, right? Red teamers go be blue teamers, and vice versa for the exact same reasons, right? So sometimes red teamers go to be blue teamers because they're frustrated with not getting stuff done and not fixing things, and they think maybe blue team is the better way to do it. But also, blue teamers know where the bodies are buried, right? So they know where the gaps are, where the holes are, and in their mind, most of the time they're thinking like, if I only had a way to demonstrate that this is an issue, and that's where red team comes in, right? So they become a red teamer, they demonstrate it, the issue gets fixed.
How useful or non-useful is it that people like, at least nowadays, know what like a buffer overflow is and these other types of, I don't want to say older like vulnerability types, but like ones that are deeper than just a cross-site scripting type of vulnerability?
What is that saying? What's old is new? So
What's old is new? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think anything foundational like that is always good in terms of learning experience. But I think I see it a little less pervasively in terms of it being like the baseline or the foundation of understanding things. I'm a fan of them. I mean, because I think they're still.
I love them, but I just don't know how useful they're going to be, how useful they are now for like generating exploits and stuff like that. If we've moved towards a point of like, well, you can use a lot of automated tools and it gets you by, but we rarely even utilize these types of types of bugs for different types of attacks. But that's just my guess. I have no idea. I'd love to hear the red teaming side of things.
I think you're right, but to me, it's an exercise of critical thinking. So that's why I like those. But I think you're right in terms of usage. It's not as pervasive or as useful, especially in an exercise.
Okay, so let's go over like in an exercise like what types of vulnerabilities or things are more useful than the prevalent types of ones that you'll find on like systems.
So you're talking about like O-Day versus LOL?
I want to say O-Day. I want to say O-Days, but I would even say like 1-days where it's like they just patched it and you can do a diff of it and then you can generate your own exploit from that. Like, how useful are those types of things versus like, I don't want to say like O-Days, but like, I don't know, different types of like entry level vulnerabilities for like web applications where like I go on Burp Suite, I go on Portswigger, I take the web security academy, and I'm learning all these vulnerabilities to get like initial footing on a web server. How useful is learning those types of entry points versus learning ones where you need a use after free bug and start chaining a bunch to be able to do a lot of things on like the server itself?
Yeah, I think so it really depends on the circumstances. If you're a consultant, I 100% think you need that foundation because you're going to see so many different organizations at various levels of maturity. For an internal red teamer, I think it really depends on the org that you're at, right? I don't think it's a bad thing to learn. I definitely think that occasionally that stuff is going to be out there, and if you don't know how to utilize it, then that's food on the table that you're not leveraging. So I definitely think it's worth learning. I think it's worth looking for because, and so this is where it goes to situational awareness and maturity of the org. If the org has a great vulnerability management program, it's probably less useful, right? Because those things are going to get fixed, they're going to get patched, they're going to be taken out of the SDLC before it even gets to production. So, it's certainly something that you don't want to take for granted in terms of like not looking for it. But if the program and the organization are fairly mature, it's a low fidelity thing.
Okay, got it. So it sounds like if there's already a team that's supposed to be handling like vulnerability research or looking at those types of things, it should be caught, and we should be shifting left anyways, kind of thing.
Should be.
Yeah, it should be. All right. Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of developing and program building, what are some challenges that you have faced or that you've seen other people when you're trying to build programs, and ways that people can be successful at those?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any organization, it's always a combination of a challenge of funding. It's a challenge of headcount and resources. So finding talent and then retaining talent and building talent. So to me, seniors are great. Like, it's cool to find senior, hardcore, been around the block red teamers, but I think the real challenge as a leader is to find, somebody fresh off the street and turn them into somebody that's finding 0 days, right? Who's doing security research and creating their own tools. To me, that's incredibly rewarding. But that takes time. And so you have to have the investment of that time. Back to the funding, like, you have to just continually chip away at that. It's like a nagging, constant, like, process, and these are things I think that are the less sexier part about leadership. And well, it's probably why a lot of people like to stay technical because these are the challenges that you have to deal with, at the leadership level. Is you have to make a case for what you're doing. And then you just have to constantly reaffirm that investment for the company. And so that can be challenging.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Like, as an entrepreneur, anyone that's like in a startup land, like, you got to be able to sell whatever you're doing, if it's yourself, if you're for a job, if it's your company, your business, all of these things. So it sounds like with this business, with the development, you also have to be able to sell the reasons that you're doing it and keep reaffirming like this is true and why. So does that also include like looking up additional like resources of like what's going on in the news to be like, this is why we do this, and just like giving a nudge?
To be honest, it's kind of shitty, but that is, to me, the best method, is taking the misfortune of others.
Yeah.
And then using that to validate your program. So when, major companies get breached, when there's a particular new tactic that comes out, or Log4j, those to me are like golden opportunities, like never let a crisis go to waste kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you demonstrate we're good or we're not good. Like, this could happen to us. Here's a cautionary tale of our competitor. Like, this could happen to us, show me the money.
Like content delivery for Netflix.
Yeah.
Did you see that? What happened?
That was so horrible. That was so horrible.
I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, it's horrible, but I'm just like, yeah, okay. I was when it started to stream, I was thinking, have they streamed anything before? Like, is this one of their first times doing this? This just the like half a second thought of like, I wonder if this is gonna be okay, but like, no, it should be fine. It's Netflix, and
I was like, somebody's getting fired. Somebody's got or not gonna have a good day today, or on Monday, I guess. Yeah, I mean. That just blew my mind. I mean, don't they have like Chaos Monkey and all that stuff that's supposed to prepare them for this kind of stuff? I guess not in live events, right?
I don't know. I have no idea. It didn't seem like it was 100% working as it should be. At least it like could have been working. I thought just from like a business side, I thought it was really interesting that they had like a live, Squid Game advertisements like in the show, so there's people sitting there.
Yeah, Cobra Kai and all that stuff.
All of it. I was like, dude, how much money did they save? Like just advertising their own stuff. Yeah. So it was a really good documentary about how like Netflix killed Blockbuster. It was really, really good. I can send it to you, but and how they have to generate their own content now. But it's the advertising thing was really interesting, I thought.
It was pretty fascinating the way that they did that. It was kind of annoying because they would always do that mid between rounds.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't finish in time, so I'm like, come on, they're fighting, like hurry up.
Yeah. Did you finish the fight? Did you watch the whole thing?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I should have gone to sleep.
I did. It was, so I'm in Italy, so it was like I stayed up till like it came on at 2 a.m. like just the the streaming part. And I was like, great. And then I was like, okay, cool. And I was like watching it. I'm like, oh man, they're just going to talk now for hours and stuff. And we got to watch fight. I was like, whatever, I'm going to bed. And I just woke up, checked the news. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, boo. And then like, oh yeah, I checked the replays. I think it's the highlights. And I was like, this is absolute shit. So I'm glad I went to sleep.
Yeah, you were wise. I wish I had.
Yeah, this is like I'll watch it tomorrow morning or whatever. But I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, utilizing other people's misfortunes in terms of being able to push your own program is a useful tactic. It was actually one of the reasons I was very skeptical about doing anything in cybersecurity for a business side of things, because I was super technical. I like helping things. I like breaking things, hacking, all those things. But then it's the mentality of like shifting over to be like, you've been to Black Hat. So like being like, okay, I'm a technical person now. The sales guy, like I got to be a sales guy. I'm like, I just don't like the idea of fear mongering that the product, yeah, this works. Otherwise, maybe it doesn't work. Like maybe you're and it's like, I don't like that.
You want to know what helped me kind of get over that hump?
Yeah. I would love to.
So I did a lot of studying and basically a master level social engineer, right? And so to me, when I think about corporate politics and I think about like how that kind of game is different from a technology standpoint, like to me, it's just a big SE experiment, and social engineering, if anything, is influence, right? So it's influencing people to do things they wouldn't normally do. So yeah, I mean, I just look at all that stuff as just another SE exercise. That's how I kind of create that internal monologue to build programs, So
what does that feedback loop look like?
So, you have your objective, right? And then you have your targets, right? Targets could be your boss, your peers, your, whatever. And then you're just there to talk to them and get them to agree that what you want to do is valid. I mean, it's just corporate life, but at the same time, like the way that I frame it in my mind is it's an SE experiment.
I don't know. Like, if the product's good, if you're actually doing a service, then you can like conceptualize that this is positive, this does help, and is worth the thing. By all means, I think it's brilliant. I think it's just like when the product is like, hey, like you could get hacked. It's like, well, what's the likelihood? It's like significantly low, and it's like, but you definitely don't want to be the guy that gets hacked. It's like that stuff. It's like, I don't know. It feels a little funny, but you probably don't get that too much on the internal side of things, huh?
Well, but I think we get it from. So it's a proposition that we have to sell on the red team side. Okay. Right? Because like people
that's true. That's true.
People are always skeptical, right? Like, okay, that's cool that you were able to get, DA or, hack into the lending system or Swift or whatever, but like how likely is, like, you get the people, how likely is that going to happen? I was like, well, it only took one email and like, 2 hops. So, I mean, it's possible. It's not hard. It's about likelihood, right? So, do you want to, it's up to you. Do you want to gamble how hard or how likely it's going to be, or do you want to fix the issue?
Yeah.
So,
and then I guess also explain what the cost is in terms of like a business side of like, this is how much it's going to cost to fix it. Like, what's the risk? Obviously the risk is going to be really high if it does happen, but if we spend about this little resource, it'll get patched up or whatever the case is.
Yeah, and I think this is where cyber insurance to me is the most frustrating thing for a red teamer, because sometimes, that card gets played. Like, this is why.
Oh, really? There's like, well, we got insurance for that kind of. Is that what it is?
It's a breakage thing, right? And I get it. Like, you don't want to spend millions of dollars to fix something that is going to cost you $100K if compromised, right? So, I mean, there's obviously like an ROI to it, but it can be frustrating when, that card gets played, or people think that, having cyber insurance is like, makes it okay.
Yeah. What are the numbers in terms of like, not specifically your company, but maybe other companies where it's like, oh, okay. Right,
I wouldn't even know. I mean, even my last company, like, I imagine it's something like your car insurance. Like they're betting nothing's going to happen, and if they do, they have to pay out. Right. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, like car insurance, a couple hundred, maybe a couple $100, but like, I'm sure this is like tens of thousands, but it's like of how much coverage of like hundreds, like let's say $10 million, right? So then it's like, yeah, unless we get hit with the $10 million attack, like it's all gravy, man. Just relax. It's like, bro, I don't I don't want to be here for any $1 million worth of attack. Because then, does jobs get fired? Do people get fired over it though too? Right? Like just because they were supposed to be in charge. Does this happen?
Yeah, it's never happened to me, thankfully. I've never worked for a company that's had, those type of issues. But yeah, I've certainly seen it happen. And in some cases, CISOs get prosecuted, so it's not a good time to be a CISO. What I would say is because you're on the chopping block literally every day for a lot of things you can't even control. So yeah, I certainly think it happens. It's like anything, like heads have to roll, right? And the CISO is typically the first one.
So you did mention like the likelihood or like how easy it is for somebody to do this type of attack. Are there cases where you guys discover an O-day and then you're like, yeah, we should fix this or we should patch this, I did read somewhere, or I guess technically listen on one of the podcasts that you mentioned that like you guys will like purposely like disclose, if you find specific O-days, you'll disclose them so that way they can be fixed and stuff like that and pretty much burn them and not like, like hold on to them internally, right?
Yeah. I think to me, it's like always that fear, who else is here in the environment? I think that's something that every red teamer should be thinking about when they're weakening targets or finding, misconfigurations or 0 days. And to me, like what would often happen is we would have these cycles of doing vulnerability research, and it may be kind of like downtime stuff that we would do. And the next exercise may not be for like 6 to 8 months, and so do I want to sit on that for 6 to 8 months with the potential possibility of using it? And having to, really develop that POC and make sure that POC works with fidelity. And then, in 6 to 8 months, what if they find, the vendor finds it on their own, or if there's some other research, right? So it's not necessarily about being first, but it is to me about that ethical responsibility of like, I don't really need to have 0 days to demonstrate risk, right? So, and I use it also sometimes as a crutch, right? I would say, we have found 0 days in the environment before. We've disclosed them, we've got rid of them, we patched them, we've done some defensive capabilities. But at the end of the day, it happens. And so I don't need to demonstrate that it happens because I've already demonstrated. I've already shown you that we found them and we did the right thing. We closed them out. But, they exist. So you can't say we cheated or, we white carded because I've proven the proposition that it could happen.
Okay, I'm playing devil's advocate. They're not just like, yeah, but Marcus, you're just like 1 in a million, dude. Like, who else is out there like you? Do they ever like come back and say this?
Sometimes. Yeah,
Are they just like, you're okay, bro? You're okay. There's a billion like you.
So you mean from the perspective of like leadership,
of skill set, of like, oh, like, you found it because you found O-days because like you're so skilled. Like the likelihood of somebody else with your skill set out there and malicious and targeting us, it's significantly low. We're not really afraid of it because you're so rare of a breed of someone that would be able to discover these types of things that we don't expect it to see it in the wild.
I think it's a fair argument, to be honest. I guess what I would always combat that argument with is, one, we're only as good as the skill sets of me and my team, right? And we're not funded like nation states. So you have 5 or 6 people here with pretty good skills, right? Like, because, I pride myself building good teams. But I'm not a nation state competitor. I don't have thousands of people at my disposal. I don't have millions of dollars in my budget to build these programs, to do these things. And, maybe the likelihood isn't there. Maybe we're not a target because of the industry or because of the way we're set up. But at the same time, like, that's who I'm competing against. So to me, I always feel like that argument is if that actor or that player ever targets us, it's game over, right? So you don't rely, and I say this all the time, don't rely on the skill set of my team to validate whether or not we should or shouldn't do something. Because I'm competing with them, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I have a question about you guys not using, or as you guys don't use O-days, or you guys just rarely use them, would you say? Is somewhere in this category, this areas?
So, like I said, it's about timing, right? So, if we're in the middle of the exercise and we find something, like, yeah, I would be pretty tempted to use it. But it just so happens, like most of the time, the timing doesn't work out. And there's a lot of like trial and error in that fidelity of making it a POC work right, just right, especially in a live exercise. So in some cases, it's not even OPSEC safe, right? Even though they're not known vulnerabilities, like it's going to start potentially doing some funky stuff to the computer, right? You're going to have and the user may report that, so from an OPSEC perspective, it doesn't always make sense.
You would report it to the vendor?
No, to report to like security operations or IT, like, hey, my computer is like randomly blue screening, like because we're executing a
Yeah, right.
like
I don't know what this kernel panic thing is. This is strange.
why is my cursor just jiggling every so often?
Yeah.
So so from an OPSEC perspective, like it can be dangerous to use those, and then a lot of times, sometimes you don't generally, if you do your homework and you've got your exercise kind of like planned out, like you don't always need it, to be honest. In fact, I've rarely found that I needed to. Yeah. So if given the opportunity, likely, yeah, I would use it. But if not in the off cycle, definitely report it, burn it.
Okay. And then in terms of like other types of consulting, pen testing firms or red teams, how do you feel about them utilizing like O-days for their type of engagements with those types of customers and either putting in those reports?
I think it can go horribly wrong. And so we've seen where security consulting companies have held on to those 0 days en masse.
Yeah, they get lost them, yeah.
And then they've been hacked, right?
Yeah.
And then, those things get leaked or used by the bad guys. And I think that's pretty much anything tradecraft wise on the red team side, which is why you should pen test yourself if you're a red team and your own infra. But I think it's an ethical gray area for me. And like I said, if you can find a way to demonstrate that risk without doing it, I would prefer. That's my preferred method. Because at the end of the day, when you're writing a report and you're trying to tell a company, like, we got in doing this thing that you have no control to fix. Like, what's the value proposition from that? Like, all that does is, like, kind of give a flex of, like, how strong your research program is. And it doesn't necessarily give the organization practical security measures to mitigate.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So you've spoken of the importance of certificates like CRTO and Spectre Ops trainings. You also have a cert from 0 Point Security. What advice would you give to somebody preparing for the certificates, and what makes each of them useful, and like the pros for each of them?
Yeah. So what I love about 0 Point CRTO is like pretty much anyone with a fairly decent understanding, like a pen tester that's trying to cross over, will get the kind of law of the land of what it is to run a red team op. Right. And you do that at self-paced. It's not one of those try harder bullshit kind of way of teaching. Like, it really just kind of lays it out for you and helps you understand not just the offensive, but the defensive capabilities. Right. So you have to, practice OPSEC in terms of like getting over Defender and EDR. So I think it's very preparatory for how to run an exercise or how to execute an exercise. And it's pretty hard to do unless you're actually doing an exercise, right? So you can study all you want red teaming, but if you don't like know what it's like to run a live fire, it's a learning curve.
It's like I've read everything about guns, but I've never shot one, kind of thing. Right?
Exactly. You don't know what the kickback is. You don't know how to make adjustments.
The smell in the air. You don't know how beautiful it is.
Yeah, 100%. And then then I look at Spectre Ops' RTO class, and to me, it's a 4-day class. So you don't get the mercy of self-pace. Like you need to go in there knowing what you're doing. But if you do, like, it is incredibly useful to know how to do a lot of things in a short amount of time. which, from a red team perspective, you're always operating with a sense of urgency, right? Because the defenders are always one step behind you, or hopefully behind you, or sometimes ahead of you. So you need to be able to execute in a quick way. And I think it kind of helps teach you that way, that sense of urgency and how to maneuver through, pretty complex environments.
Are both of them, the first one that you mentioned, is that one exercises as well? Like they'll give you a lab environment and you play around, or is it like mostly questions?
Yeah, the exam is 100%, 3 flags, I think it might be 5 flags. It's been a while. But yeah, it's find X amount of flags, and either you do or you don't.
Okay. But do they, for the exercises up to the exam, are there labs that you get to work and play around with?
Oh yeah. I mean, literally step by step, pretty much everything that you do in the exam is in the training material. So it's about the critical thinking and knowing when to apply what, where, and when. That requires that situational awareness and critical thing. I mean, obviously that's the key, right? Is knowing when to apply the knowledge. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that one for that reason.
Okay. And then is it in a cloud environment where you're using it, you're like pivoting in like AWS or Google Cloud, or is it less about the cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, I think last time I checked, it's mostly on-prem stuff. But yeah, I would like to see either some modifications or advancements or kind of new labs coming out or new certs coming out that have that hybrid focus. Because hey, that could be $1 million idea if you want to collaborate.
There you go. If you want to build it, man.
Because you don't see that a lot. And I think that's what's getting orgs a lot these days is, cloud is so fresh and so new. And people.
Oh, it's not though, man. Well, it's like 15 years new. Yeah, like it's been here for a while.
You're right. But I think really when you think about the monolith of on-prem, it's still pretty new, right?
Yeah.
When you think about large enterprises that have on-prem capabilities.
Do we still have a lot of them that are on-prem? Like I know government facilities are on-prem, but and like other difficult like regulatory ones they're on-prem, but I feel like a lot of them are even shifting to be.
Yeah. You're seeing a lot of transition, but I think that transition, right, from on-prem to cloud, there's always that overlap, right?
Bro, and it's terrible. There'll still be like, for specifically, so like from what I've heard or seen, because I'm very limited in the red teaming pen testing area, but what I've heard is like a lot of companies when they're when they're acquiring a company that was on-prem or a different cloud, they'll take in like a Windows 7 box and then the whole thing's not doing well.
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, I think you definitely get a lot of benefits of agility in the cloud, but especially in orgs that are old and immature and in their lifecycle management, you're going to see that. But yeah, I would love to see something where you take advantage or you red team that kind of hybrid approach of bouncing back and forth between cloud and on-prem as a premise for, a red team exercise or red team training. That'd be cool. And maybe it's out there. I just don't know about it.
Okay. Yeah. I would. So like, at least when I'm telling like anyone who's like interested, like, I think because everyone's like, I want to do red teaming, they're like, okay. Or like pen testing. They'll watch one video on DEF CON talks and be like, yeah, so I want to do this. I need a pen test. I need a red team. I want to be the guy breaking down the door and stuff. Like, okay, well, let's back up a little bit, but I recommend that they start learning cloud environments because I feel like when you're going into red teaming, if you don't know cloud and you only know on-prem, I feel like it's going to be somewhat of a limited hurdle, especially when you have such high levels of competition of people that want to do that role and that are learning kind of what you're saying in terms of like, you need to know the network environment, and you need to know the operating systems and stuff like that you're working with. Because today it's not like, hey, we just need to learn Windows and like this Windows network. It's like you got to know everything about whatever cloud environment we have, and I expect you to know how to run a 7-8 figure company by the time you start, and know what our cloud infrastructure looks like and how to handle different types of events and stuff like that, right? So like almost like jumping into like a solutions architect position for cloud infrastructure as soon as you start. And then I think having that strong understanding will then teach you how to pivot and move around and be more comfortable when you're doing more red teaming stuff. Would you say that's accurate, or would you feel like there's something to add?
It's funny because like I never really thought of that until just now. I mean, it is basically the analogy that I gave of being a sysadmin to learn how to red team. I mean, being a cloud admin or being a cloud architect to know how to red team is probably the new. I think
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, we're seeing because I mean different types of attacks that I've looked like at least I don't even know what exercise. I think it was just no who you know who it was hack all the things. It was dual core. He gave a talk about hacking AWS cloud infrastructure at B-Sides Columbia, and I was there. I was listening to it, and he's just talking about all these like really unique ways of like getting them of like so like you just get the Terraform file and just add in what you want, because these permissions aren't here, and so he's like talking about attacking the infrastructure. I'm like, this is brilliant. So I think that's the initial spark I had for like if you're doing some of these like red team engagements or pen testings, it's probably behooves you to know the environments that you'll be in, and specifically in the cloud. So
Yeah. And then, it starts to get really complicated in a multi-cloud environment, right? Learning AWS is much different than learning Azure or GCP, right? So
yeah, I feel very bad for people that are like having to figure out both things, because I also get the question of like, which one do I need to start with? And I'm like, who do you want to work for, and like what are they using? Because it's kind of hard. It can be all over the place, really.
it is. Yeah, and I think that's just the nature of being a red teamer. You have to be jack of all trades, master of none. And could I build a Azure, AWS, and GCP environment? Yeah, 100%. Would it be worth the crap? Probably not. Could I myself get hacked doing it? Probably. So, it definitely gives you that empathy to think about these cloud admins that have to do that, right? Because there are some that are like multi-cloud, having to think about all 2 or 3 or 4 platforms and how to engineer, architect, and secure. So, yeah, I mean, I feel for them. I just have to be right once, they have to be right every single time.
That makes it significantly more difficult. In terms of them like being wrong once, do you have some types of stories or things in terms of social engineering engagements that you've done at your company or maybe other places, or have heard of any that you'd like to share?
The art of the fish is kind of dead to me in terms of how I approach things. So for me, like what I really enjoy is like vishing.
Yeah, please elaborate on phishing. I heard this in the social engineering podcast episode, and I was like, "The f is that?" And I had to like look it up, and I was like, "Okay, a better understanding." But for the audience, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the social engineering component using the phone, right? So instead of sending email, you're calling somebody, and it's low tech.
I have a question. So like, that's what I read as first. And I was like, okay, cool. So my brain went to, I think there was one specific attack where they actually did do this, but I'm thinking, okay.
Maybe.
What was that?
MGM? The more recent
Oh, fuck, dude. Yeah, I mean, that was terrible. Yeah, that was brilliantly terrible. But no, I'm talking about like, vishing. So what am I doing? Am I acting like Elon Musk and I'm calling X and being like, you guys need to cut the servers now kind of thing? Like, how, like, what level of like vishing are we doing? Is it like, I'm calling personally? I'm saying like, hey, you guys need to fix this, or are we talking about like getting enough data to generate a voice and then having them call as a specific user?
Yeah, I mean, situational awareness, and again, like it depends on the maturity of the org and the size. Like if you're a 10, 20,000 employee company, like what are the odds of me picking a random person from the company, OSINTing them, profiling them, and then calling in as them? What are the odds that you're going to know what that voice sounds like? So do I want to spend all of that time deep faking their voice, or do I just want to, maybe fake a British accent or something,
He could do that too. Ideally, I would imagine he'd pick somebody that's higher up at the org and that have spoken to the same people, and then just like, because if you're higher up in the org, you probably have talks. You probably have actually voice content. Because if you don't have the voice content, it'd be a bit more harder.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that though is that's what gets you busted. Like what are the odds that Elon is calling me right now? Like, and calling the help desk, right? Doesn't have people for that, so people think about this.
The help desk guy, yeah.
So that can get you caught. I mean, especially if they're one message away. I mean, who's going to like, at X or SpaceX, like message Elon, hey, are you calling right now? Like they're probably not, So maybe,
yeah.
I mean, it could go both ways, right? I mean, if you use that tactic or pretext properly, like, yeah, it's plausible. I mean, it certainly could work.
I think I saw a recent article of somebody talking like it was crazy actually. They like called to like change or create like a will or a trust or something like that and try to get the money transferred. And then they were using voice AI, but then they were also like did a video AI. But luckily the law firm was like, can you raise your like left hand so we know it's you? And then, but it was like a still image and like the mouth was like kind of moving and they were able to catch it from like this. But I think I feel like identity in terms of like this AI is going to get very interesting in terms of social engineering in the near future.
So, shout out to Rachel Toback. She's got some really cool demos where she's actually done that for companies and like documented it and like shown how those deepfakes can be real.
Yeah.
She's just phenomenal social engineer. Like I just enjoy watching her stuff and her content.
Where can people watch her stuff and content at?
Well, she's on Twitter or X, excuse me, at Rachel Toback, Tobac. She's got a company called Social Proof, I believe is. Yeah, Social Proof Security. Yeah. I'm sure she's got it. She also does security awareness training. So her video and content is pretty engaging. It's kind of like a comedic and theatrical effect to it. So it's very kind of different approach, which I love. But yeah, she's got some content out there and I can provide that. Where she's done some of those social engineering calls, or she's done some of the deepfake stuff and how to like kind of raise awareness on how to like detect it. But I think some of the things that you talked about, where like the still image doesn't move or there's choppiness in the rendering, like are good indicators. I'm not by no means an expert like her, but like she's got some pretty cool stuff out there.
And then you also mentioned at one of your, maybe it was on Twitter. When I was stalking you, doing my OSINT, you had the hashtag WeHackHealth, and then I was like trying to figure out what that is and like looking more into it. And it looks like it's more like health related types of things. Could you go into more about what that is?
Yeah, so Dave Kennedy, Hacking Dave, and Ben Canning, fitness trainer in Ireland. Dave was working with Ben, went on his own fitness journey, and then as he turned into a super soldier, which is what he looks like now, he started kind of advertising that on Twitter and social media, and it just kind of resonated with me, having been prior military and having health issues as a result of injuries and just being out of shape. And, if you think about kind of like the biology of fitness and health, there is kind of like this, for me, another like breadth of knowledge and intellectual curiosity about how to tweak your body and how to maximize, macros and gains and goals. And I think, it was just a community that he and Ben spawned together. I'm actually wearing the shirt, ironically.
There you go. Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. And just, that idea of using kind of that same intellectual curiosity and thought process of how to hack your body for health benefits and longevity is kind of what that's about from my perspective, at least. And so I belong to the lifting club that Ben Canning runs, and we do events and go all over the country, all over the world. Actually, I was in Ireland a couple of months ago for, the grand opening of his private gym, and just seeing my gains, like going from like never deadlifting in my life to like, approaching the 400 mark, in less than a year. Like it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I remember where I saw it from. It was on your Twitter, and it was like a picture of you working on a DEF CON, and you're like, God, if you told me I was going to do this, I was not going to do it. Because I was just about to comment and be like, bro, you work at a DEF CON? Like, let's go work out sometime. But I don't know. If you're still doing it, we should do it when it comes back around.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ben will be there. And so you can sign up and we can work out. That's what I did basically is I took a friend, her name is Kritika Lawani. She's another red teamer over at Optiv, I think. She used to work for me.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. And I was like, hey, you want to go do this? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like waking up at like 8, 9 in the morning during DEF CON, which I would have never done because I was the guy that, stays out till the sun comes up, drinking at LobbyCon. And, this past year, I did a little bit of it, but for the most part, I was, pretty responsible and met people that I wanted to meet and didn't sleep in and went and worked out. And man, it was a whole different DEF CON for me.
I've realized, like, I think I think now that I'm in Italy and stuff, and I've been just not in around so many Americans at nighttime, I've realized how much we drink. But it also could just be hackers in general, but I think it is also the American side as well. But yeah, I went to Offensive Con this year in Berlin and was drinking as usual. But then like the next day I woke up and I'm like, I need to like treat myself. Like I gotta feel a little bit better, so I'm just gonna go work out. So I went to go work out, and then I had like a sauna right afterwards, and I felt so good. I'm like, I just need to do this every single time. It's like just get a little workout, get a little sauna, and then like go back to drinking, and then I just drank the rest of the night.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly. I think that what's interesting about the We Hack Health movement is like it's kind of going against that norm, right? Like of that drinking culture and you know, and then there's nothing against it. Like I did it for years. It just, you know, over time it has caught up to me and gotten kind of old, and I've missed out on opportunities and time with friends and family and stuff like that. And I still drink, obviously, but you know, not as much, or, you know, not till the sun comes up unless I have to, you know. I'll rally every once in a while, but you know, it's just kind of a cool thing, you know, to really think about longevity and as I get older, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have a kid, right? Like, you know,
3.
it's, you got 3. Are they, any, how do I ask this? Are they boys and girls?
I only make boys.
Oh, geez, that's good. I play in The Sims, and like, we had a girl, then we had another girl, then we had another girl. So we had 3 girls. And I was like, babe, like I can't, like, this is ridiculous. Like, so I like Google, I was like on ChatGPT, I'm like, how to make male, and like, you got to feed him carrots or listen to alternative music when the womb is in there. And then, yeah, so we got a boy, and she's like, do you want another boy? I was like, sure. And then she had twins, and there were 2 girls, and I was like, okay, freaking hell, like 6 girls and 1 boy or something. I can't do math right now, but it was too many kids.
Yeah, I have twin boys. And then
twin boys. Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, they're my older. Yeah.
Did twins run in your family or run in her family?
No, I think it was a birth control snafu. So
which birth control is that?
Happens. Well, when you come off of it or switch.
Well, I got to get her on it so then she can get off of it, and then we can have twin boys. This science.
That's what happens. I mean, like there's this window where you're like potentially, this is so random talking about extra fertile, and it's like 2 eggs dropped and bang, bang, you know?
Nice. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Then okay, cool. I like, maybe there's like a lot of science on this. I should look it up. Yeah. Send me the birth control later after this. I'm going to figure this out. I'll be the first person researching this.
Yep. Fertility expert, Marcus Sailler.
Yeah. I'll put you in the white paper. All right. Speaking of white papers, what CVEs have you found and discovered and talked about, or ones that, I guess they want to be CVEs if you hadn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so full disclosure, as I've stepped into a leadership role, doing less of the technical side, right? So a lot of the CVs are the CVs that I have under my belt are kind of like a team collab effort where we all just kind of pitched in and you know, did the work, and then I took the credit for it.
Okay. What is the team effort that you guys helped build out? Were they, what kind of CVEs were they? What kind of tools did you guys use to discover them?
Yeah, I mean, Process Hacker is freaking free and valuable. I mean, basically, a lot of vulnerabilities are kind of exhibiting the same behavior, right? It's running at a high level integrity process, right? A context that's outside of what it should be. And then it's accessing user space that is low level privilege as you can intercept, right? And so basically the method was just take your basic software and observe it through Process Hacker or Procmon. And if you see it doing something it shouldn't or going to places it shouldn't, that's where you, and especially in permissions that you have access to, that's where you intercede, right? And so Snagit was a good example. If you're not familiar with Snagit, it's a TechSmith screenshot software. It's pretty cool. It creates videos, it creates screenshots that you can edit and crop, and it's like super, super fancy screen clipper, right? Well, what it was doing was it was writing to a particular folder in userland so that all the files that you would, all the things you would screenshot would automatically get saved to your profile and you could access it. Well, it's running as, for some reason, I assume because it is accessing the desktop and the things that it was doing, it was running as a system. But it was dropping files in userland, in the user data file folder, right? So what you could do is you could interject where it was writing because it was doing it in a predictable pattern.
Oh.
And that's where you drop your DLL or whatever you wanted with a symlink to get your payload execution. So LP, right? It was like a medium. I think it was like a 7.6 or something like that. And yeah, it was strange and scary to me at how easy stuff like that is to find and how prevalent it is.
That's super interesting. This is just like pulling out, like, because it's just writing to the desktop, so you don't really need that level of permissions. But then it's like any application that writes to anything on the system, like, how do you know what it's calling? Actually, I guess that my follow-up question would be, not follow-up question, but a question I have now would be, when you're executing it, does it ask for like admin permissions?
Nope.
How does it get system permissions?
So the exe, the service itself is running as a system, right? So when it's any process that it spawns underneath it inherits that user integrity, right?
So when you execute it, it doesn't say like, boom, 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 like you need to be okay with this?
No, there's no UAC or anything. It's just the way that the app works.
What?
So it was interesting, and shout out to them. Like, they were very responsive and very quick to try to solve for the issue, because I think they recognized, if this software is installed on literally every computer in an organization, like how big of an issue that could be. So they issued a fix, and basically, because of the nature of the way that the software worked, like they couldn't fix the fact that it was writing to userland, right? Like there was just not, because that's just the way that it needed to work. So their mitigation was actually pretty clever. Instead of putting a predictable, like timestamp into where they dropped the file, they appended like some random strings to it that was completely unpredictable. So it was still doing the same thing. The vulnerability technically still existed, but it was mitigated in a way that you couldn't take advantage or predict where it was going. So you couldn't necessarily replay the vulnerability anymore. I thought it was pretty genius.
You can't predict where it's saving the file?
Yeah. Because it would randomly append a string at the end of the timestamp.
Okay. Interesting. And then, let me see. What other questions? Do you have any questions for me as I'm looking over the additional questions? We have a whole conversation. It doesn't have to be just one way.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm curious to know, like, where do you want to take this podcast, and like, who are you interested in talking to?
This episode, or you mean like the entirety of the podcast? Yeah. So that's a good question.
You on the spot, interview you.
Do it. Yeah. No, did you know how hard it was to get to like make episode 1 where it's just me talking? I was like, what? I got to ask myself questions. Like, it was so hard. I like went on Reddit and just posted like, I'm a hacker, ask me some questions, so that I had something. Bunch of assholes on Reddit.
Obviously. Like,
yeah. Anyways, where do I want to go with the podcast? So it's actually, the way I even thought about having the podcast was I was listening to a lot of podcasts around recruiting. Specifically, I was listening to The Resilient Recruiter by Mark Whitby. He's got like, at the time it was like 200 and something episodes, and I was like, I'm not going through all of this. So like, I was like, let me just get all of them, put it in like an AI, and like chat with it so I can get some expertise on it. But the one episode was just him talking about the podcast. I found it super insightful, and he was like, yeah, so like, I actually built this out so that I could actually get more clients for educating people on how to to build a 7 to 8 figure recruiting agency. So like, he would actually take people that are already doing like at least 6 or 7 figures and then help them grow to 8 and 9, because he would have these interviews talking to them about like how they grew and stuff like that. So he's like, yeah, I just started interviewing those people and eventually they became my clients and stuff. I was like, that's really smart. So he uses it for like lead gen, but also being able to like learn and educate himself and connect with people. So I'm over here in Italy. There are hackers here in Italy, but my Italian's not that great yet, so I can interview them or chat with them. So this is an easy way for me to conversate with other Americans or other people in the United States that have either started a business or are working at the pinnacle of their like cybersecurity expertise, like yourself, or people that are investing in cybersecurity. So if you're investing in cybersecurity, you're helping our industry grow. There's jobs, there's things that are there. So at one point, it's to like potentially have a connection with recruiting to be able to recruit for some types of companies. Additionally, while building and growing other types of companies and learning about their struggles and stuff like that, it does position myself and the investors that invest in these types of businesses. It puts myself in a good position in the next year or two once I have enough people that maybe I start a fund in cybersecurity where I can help grow and invest, start companies and stuff like that. So while I'm talking to people that are the founders of companies, learning about their struggles and stuff like that, it puts me in a, like I said, good position to be able to do stuff with that.
That's cool. That's a pretty smart strategy.
Yeah, that's been super helpful. Additionally, just speaking to experts like yourself, and other people in general, if I'm like, hey, like, let's chat, people are like, go away, I got work. But if I'm like, hey, do you want to talk about yourself? People are like, yeah, sure, nice, great. So it's been a lot easier just like, yeah, sure, go ahead and talk and like have a conversation. It's been mutually beneficial, of course, but it's been much easier doing outbounds and saying like, hey, let's chat. So we're on episode 7 or 8, and we've been going like, man, God, we've been going strong for about 2 months now, and we have a lot more guests that are like lined up. So hopefully we can get Corellium set up on here as well, and other types of researching groups and stuff. So it's been terrific. And in terms of like content that we've been pushing out, we've been, like we spoke before we started our conversation, we've been really focusing on the quality of the talent rather than just getting people on buzzwords and stuff like that, right? So you have enough, like, God, you go on TikTok, it's absolutely horrid about the content creation of people like, hey, click here, bing, bing, like hacking, like phishing and all the just shit content. Like I'd say 90% of it's shit content. And I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to make sure like whatever we're talking about, like we'll make good long form content, then we'll clip it and then share those clips and stuff like that. So we deliver about 210 pieces of content on a weekly basis across 10 platforms.
That's wild.
We've really started automating and pushing a lot of the content off. So my wife actually doing most of the content delivery stuff. I'm really proud of her. Just yesterday we got set up on IMDb as well. So her company is set up on the content delivery, and I'm the director and just chatting and conversations and recording them.
That's cool. I think having a tech background is probably pretty helpful in terms of being able to do all the things, right, across multiple platforms and clipping and cutting.
At the end of the day, do you really want to like set up a web server and start managing? No, like I'm happy to pay for someone else to like, all right, just get this shit up. Like I'll just point if it's like too vulnerable or there's too many issues, but as long as it's good to go, we're moving fine. Like I'm using GitHub to like get pages.
Get pages. You're not using a WordPress site with
I should.
All the vulnerable plugins.
God, no. Jesus, yeah, just hit it with a WP scanner. We're done. No, I was terrified of those. But yeah, no, definitely not. But yeah, it's been a journey. I don't know if that answers your question. Where we want to go with it? Ideally, in the next year, we want to actually do like the sit down, like come and hang out. We'll have a conversation kind of thing. Probably have a physical studio. We want to have a physical studio, but like maybe at DEF CON or Black Hat have like a pop up thing where people chat as well, come by and stuff, and get some good content.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So. Yeah, that's how about yourself? Like, let's talk more into the future of what you personally want to do, and then where you see yourself with the companies. Because I know, and in going back to the companies, you worked at one massive financial institution for a significant amount of time, and then you shifted over. What was the motivating factor to move over, and how have things been in that transition?
Yeah, I think. I'm pausing to think of the way.
No, don't just say it. Just say it directly, dirty, and then we might have to edit it.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you run into a wall with either how far you can take things, and the people that are around to either help or hurt you do that. And, the mentor that I talked about, he retired, and, it was kind of a changing of the guard. And, I felt less and less like the new hot thing, and the capabilities that I was building, the value of that was kind of getting right sized in a way that was, to me, seemed like I didn't agree with kind of the idea that, red teams internally are maybe not so, or something you can outsource. And yeah, I think you can to some extent, but I think it's got to be a hybrid approach of internal, external. And then, the size of the company was big, but the scope of which the company operated was still fairly limited to the Americas. And so I look at a company like MUFG, which is where I'm at now. It's a global company. It's like one of the seventh largest bank in the world, and they've got offices and regions all over the world, from Europe to Asia to North, South America. Like, it's a much larger scale, and they didn't have a program. And so to me, like, the funnest part of this gig is building a program and getting to kind of like write the book of Marcus, so to speak. And, taking all the things that I learned from the previous gig and the things I did wrong or that I would have done differently, and applying that in a new way to where I'm at now. Like, my relationship with the blue team is much different. The way I approach things is much different. It was an exciting thing for me to kind of start anew. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's the growing pains challenge that you always get when you start a new program from scratch. But there's also that kind of rewarding component of changing people's careers and mentoring people new in the field, and, building something out of nothing that is kind of a legacy for you, which is kind of what I, did cherish about my last org. It just seems exciting to me. So
awesome. Yeah, that's actually a common thing for like serial entrepreneurs. They really like starting and building and giving people those opportunities and having them, drink from the fire hose and just get out there to be able to build stuff. So it sounds like that maybe that's what yours is for like red teaming and like having to develop these programs. So at least what it is now, and at where you're currently at. Here's an introspective question that I have, and feel free to answer. If you don't want to answer, it's fine too. Do you feel that the skills and lessons that you had learned from your previous job of like how to work with the blue team and the different departments, if you knew that going in or at your last job, do you think some of the relationships and things would change differently? And would it be monumentous to any types of changes that had happened, or do you still think you'd be on the same type of trajectory of where you're at or had gone down?
I definitely think it would have changed my trajectory if I could apply some of the things that I know now. And I think it's just the natural progression of career, like you learn, you evolve, and you change, right? So I think as I'm playing at a higher level and a global level, and, the rules change for me as well. I'm sure looking back at the next org or the next opportunity, I'll look back at what I'm doing now and think retrospectively like, oh, I could have done that differently, this, that different. But I think for me, like, the most pinnacle thing is the emphasis and importance of relationship building. I got kind of a slow start, even though I was there 15 years, I kind of got a slow start in managing up and making relationships at a higher leadership level that are valuable. Whereas, like, I feel like I'm doing that a lot better now because I see how important it is. Because, those are the people that are your allies that are going to make or break you. And if they're not on board, or at least in a position of good relationship with you to help, like, they just become an obstacle. And so, not to seem transactional about it, because, these are relationships that you cultivate and you build, and they need to be genuine in order for them to be effective. But I certainly think if the way that I'm doing it now, if I had done that, 10 years ago at my previous gig, like, it might have come out differently. I don't know how differently. Maybe the environment was not, amenable to that, or, right time, right place. Like, It's one of those things that you always kind of scratch your head and wonder, like, I could have done it this way. Like, I don't have a time machine, so.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. So what kind of soft skills do you feel like you could share or, and bestow your wisdom towards the listeners on what they can do now to start building those relationships with some of the leaders, whether they're directly underneath them or even if they're like adjacent in their organization or even outside their organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's like when you think about relationship building, it can't be transactional in nature.
You said it can't be or it can be?
Cannot.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so if I'm reaching out to you because I need something and that's the only time I ever reach out to you, like how often are you going to let that kind of
I see. Okay.
happen, right? And so if I'm reaching out to you and it's like just to check on how you're doing and like really genuinely interested in you as a person and how we can collaborate and not just the value that you can bring me, but the value that I can bring you. Like to me, if you're not doing that and you're just simply treating work as work, like you're not going to get very far with that relationship building. So it cannot, absolutely not be transactional nature because you never know. You never know when you're going to need something or somebody's going to need to help you or you're going to be in the position to help them. And if you're just simply, hi, can I get this? Hey, can you do that? Like, it's not good or political savviness or organizational savviness.
Political savviness. That's correct. That's the phrasing. Yeah, it's the one like a one-way transaction where it's like, hey, I need something, so I'm contacting this person. That it's better to reach out to somebody when you don't need anything to say, hey, just here to check up, like what's going on, like, I can and have a general interest in like what it is that they're doing without having an ask. So it sounds like if you increase the amount of interactions that you have with individuals, when you don't have something. When you do have something, that way for when you do have something, you'll be able to like it be more natural instead of just like transactional or process B. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, how many times has somebody asked you for something and that's all they ever do, and like the first thing in your head is like, oh, dude, what does this guy need now? Like you never want to be in that position when it comes to relationship building because at the end of the day, like everybody's busy, right? So if I'm going to inconvenience you, like there's got to be some type of acknowledgement that you're helping me out and, I'll get you the next time or, how can we work together? How can we collab? That's the really way that you should be thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And then like this, I guess this specifically goes more towards like if you don't know the individual you're reaching out, like always try to provide some level of value. If you don't know, take a shot in the dark because it's still better than just saying, hey, let's connect. I want this from you. Because it's like, hey, like, I noticed that you're doing this or something like this. Are you interested in, if you need any assistance with this, like, please let me know, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think to me, like the most easiest hack to do that is like, when you introduce yourself, don't go for the ask right away, obviously. Introduce yourself, what you do, ask them, like, I heard you have this area of responsibility. I'm curious about this because of this. Do you mind if I set up, and this is the real pro hack here, is don't ask for like a 30-minute to an hour meeting. Like, can I have like 10 minutes of your time? Can I just drop a 10-minute calendar invite? Because people love that because we traditionally think in the corporate world of blocks of 30 in an hour.
Yeah.
And if you're blocking 15 minutes of my time, that means that functionally half an hour is taken away. I have the other 15 to 20 minutes to actually get work done because you've blocked that calendar block. Mm-hmm. It's almost in a way that like there's some type of psychological component of it where you're more amenable to meeting with someone for 10 to 15 minutes because it's not like a full thing.
Yeah.
And you set the stage in a way that's like it's an informal thing, like, hey, I just want to get to know each other. And then maybe you drop the ask, or maybe if you can, you wait a little longer, you drop the ask in the meeting, you approach it in a way that's kind of like this dance, right? Where you're like, what do you do? What do I do? Like, how can we help each other? And then, well, if you're offering, like, could you help me with this? Mm-hmm. It's the way that I'm going to set things up.
Yeah. And I would even say like, it is a dance. I think it's easier when you just have the other person talk about what they've been up to, or other really useful networking skills that I've picked up is that you whether like if you're in person and you're walking around, whatever, is you ask, hey, what kind of resources are you looking for? Because the resources is so open-ended. They could talk about money, they could talk about people, they could talk about like whatever, but it gets to the point of exactly why are you here networking, without being like a dick about it.
Yeah.
The timing one's also interesting. Like I would even my like mental thought is like you can even drop it so it's like a odd, it's not divisible by 5 or 5 or 10. So like instead of like a 15-minute meeting, like a 14-minute meeting or like a 9-minute meeting, so then it's like, oh, it's even less time than like an average thing. It's like, yeah, that's even more relaxing or something.
So like the guy that invented like the 8-minute abs, the next guy invents the 7-minute.
What about
abs?
7-minute abs? No, you can't do it in 7 minutes. Oh, okay, sorry. What that was a movie, right?
Yeah,
was
I don't remember.
I think it was Office Space.
It was a Ben Stiller movie, I think.
Yeah. Oh my God. Was it The Animal maybe or Deuce Bigelow or something?
I want to say it was. I want to say it was Meet the Fockers.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah, you remember he meets
maybe.
the grifter and he like picks him up like the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
The hitchhiker's the one explaining the 7-minute abs.
No, it's something about Mary.
Yes, that's it. Something about Mary. A little movie trivia.
This is my life, my little personal story. That was the first R-rated movie I ever saw as a kid. And then like I saw it with my dad who took me. And then my mom, she took me to church the the Sunday. And the pastor was like, yeah, there's like, has anyone actually seen that movie? Like, there's something about Mary. And I like raised my hand as like a 10-year-old. I'm like, I did. And my mom was like super embarrassed. Yeah.
I was the grown
It's a
adult.
ridiculous movie.
Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. They don't really make movies kind of that low, different brow kind of humor.
Yeah. There's a whole subject to talk about what they're making now and feelings about those. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of the direction that you're going with the company, so with UMFG, you're able to now build out the red team and have more say, and it's global. How is shifting from like a global enterprise? How is that relative to like just specifically in one region?
It's a whole different ball game because, from the Americas, like red team is a fairly acceptable term, and there's some pretty like clear parameters to me in a way that you can and can't red team. But then when you start thinking about like different countries and different regions, like you have GDPR, you have regulatory concerns, you have privacy concerns, you have legal concerns. I don't want to like do something, in a China office or a Singapore office, and then like I can never come to that country. There's all kinds of concerns you have to think about from that perspective. And then all your tactics have to change too. Like a social engineering tactic that I use in the US is probably not going to be effective in Japan or in Australia or UK or, you really have to think about it from the pretext perspective of that region. And I'm maybe not necessarily equipped to know how to do that or what that even is. So those kind of colloquials that we take for granted or we think about, that we see foreign threat actors try to attack us and we're like, oh, that's Nigerian prince. That's stupid. Like, in essence, I'm that version trying to hit some of the Asia, attacks. So like really thinking about it from that perspective can be difficult. And then just the vastness, like when you think about the grain of sand in the ocean, like a larger company is just a whole nother set of complexities when it comes to your scope, your approach, your stakeholder buy-in, even just delivering a report, like who cares about this? Like not from a perspective, like, do they care, but like, who's my stakeholder? Right. And so, sometimes just navigating that can be a challenge.
How do you navigate that? Or like, what have been some strategies that have helped you navigate those types of things?
This is where networking,
specifically the was that networking?
Yeah, this is where networking comes in, right? So if I don't know something, if I know somebody that knows something, like I know a guy, right? So that has been pretty helpful. Is like people that have tenure, people that have certain positions, like they will generally know the answer. And if they know the answer, then they know a guy. And so like, it's that kind of 6 degrees of separation of just trying to get there. But if you don't know anybody to ask anybody, then you're not going to get anywhere. So, once again, it's that emphasis of that relationship building. So that to me has been effective. It may take a little bit longer, but then you learn, right? And then now you have the next person that you've made a relationship with. And it just kind of like, it's like a people infection that you're like spreading around the organization. Like, how do I get to know and understand how the org works and be able to navigate it and maneuver it?
And so are you also like meeting other people from other countries and stuff like that inside your organization, like people that are employed at the company but in other places?
Yeah, you might have to ask me in 6 months.
Okay.
So I'm still pretty early stage in terms of how that's being built out. Like there's a lot of focus on the Americas and building that out first.
Exactly, and that's where our company, Top Cleared Recruiting, comes in. Finding the right cybersecurity talent with the necessary clearances can be a major hurdle. Did you know that it could take 8 to 15 months on average to hire somebody with a TS SEI plus full polyscope? At Top Cleared Recruiting, we have a network of 1.3 million cleared professionals, ranging from C&O developers, reverse engineers, and data scientists. Whether you're working on offensive operations or data analysis, we connect you with the elite talent you need fast. Visit topclearedrecruiting.com and let us help you to find the perfect candidate, already cleared and ready to go.
It's like a POC right now in the Americas, and then if it works out well, you'll deploy to other areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, it's going to happen. It's just, a matter of like order of operation, right? So when do we do the other regions? How do we hire? And really there's kind of
how do you hire? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of two approaches. Like, do I hire in the Americas and have them focus on the regions, or do I hire in the regions and have them focus on the regions? Like, it gets real complex, real easy, right? So, and then you think about like the pipeline, right? Like the US has a military industrial complex that just churns out red teamers, right? Like red teamers are everywhere in here. You go to some of the other countries, like where it's not as pervasive or not as acceptable to do hacking as a career, you're going to run into challenge. You're going to run into talent issues. I mean, it's already a talent issue in the US trying to compete with other companies to get somebody to go in an office X amount of days. And
yes, right. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I'll be quite honest, I've been to different conferences and looked at the skill levels of other people. And like, I do think that there are good hackers in other countries, but when it comes to work ethic, I don't see people work as hard as Americans generally across the board. And period. I don't know what to still say. Like, I feel like Americans work really hard. Other people do as well. Other cultures do. Japan, if you're looking in Japan, probably do pretty good too. But I think Americans work very hard, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, and then it's like, it goes to the pipeline too. Like hiring somebody from the NSA to be a red teamer, like you're not going to get that kind of experience run of the mill in many of the other countries. So
yeah, right.
How do you tap into that, for those regions, or does that even exist is kind of the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's significantly harder to do. I wish I had more like insights on specifically those, but most of the people we recruit are US people. There's been other instances where like other companies want, but it's mostly researchers. It's not really operators. But yeah, that's interesting. How are you thinking about like trying to solve that challenge?
Fail fast.
Yeah, right.
To be honest, I don't really have a methodology ironed out yet. It's going to be trial and error, I suspect. And a lot of
how big is a team that you guys are going to be growing over the next few years?
That's another question that I would probably have in 6 months. I think when I think about the vision of it, probably at a minimum 5 US and then maybe 15 to 25 globally. Just given the size and the scope and the nature of the work, it would be a difficult proposition to do any less, do that much with less.
No, do more, get more jobs, man. Do it. You got it.
I'm trying.
All right. So this question, coming a little bit back, I want to know a little bit more about people that shifting over to red team from a vulnerability research side?
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't see many researchers actually going red team.
You see it the opposite way?
I usually see red teamers getting burnt out and hating life as an operator and really wanting to focus on research. Because research is the sexy part of it, right? Like, it's the cool, glamorous, like, popping 0 days and getting your street cred and CVEs. And, like, you don't regularly get to do that as an operator.
That's so funny. I feel it's the exact opposite. I feel like everyone's like, "Oh my god, like red teaming's so fucking sick, man. Like I gotta fucking get shells all day. Like it's just, I flick my wrist and I get a shell." While like, while you have researchers sometimes spending like 3 months, 6 months not finding. It depends on the bugs. Honestly, it depends on the bugs. If we're talking like low, easy bugs, fine. But if you're talking like some big boy chains and stuff like that, yeah, you could sit there for 6 months, 9 months, a year, just banging your head trying to find something. And then like eventually maybe you do. Yeah.
That's interesting, that perspective. I guess I don't spend a lot of time with researchers who are pure researchers. So it's interesting to see that perspective be counter to kind of what I was thinking. That's cool.
Yeah, I can get over some like numbers and stuff like that. So like some of the roles that I would be placing for would be anywhere between 200, 250,000, not total comp, just salary. And then, the exploits that they're producing, it's going to be in the millions for the clients that they're selling them to. And of course for the per agency, right? So, they churn up a lot of money. It's just, but it's like, they just have to have a warehouse or keep building up their warehouse of O-days for specific types of research. And it's like, it is cutting edge and stuff like that. And it is difficult and they have to know everything about it. So, I think it's one of those things where it's like, I'm speaking from what I'm hearing and seeing of other individuals. I think it's a longer time for a win, what it seems like, versus like red teaming where it's like, or even like pen testing, if you're talking like multiple engagements, like a week or every few months, versus, finding a bug every like 6 months to a year.
It may not exist, right?
Yeah, that might not even exist, and then you're wondering like, is it you that's just stupid, or like
gaslighting?
Is it? Yeah, exactly. Then you're just like, man, am I even a hacker? And can't even find this damn thing because like the majority of the times like researchers see stuff. It's like, oh yeah, like this person found something. And it's like, oh cool, and it's like sometimes you read their blog articles and it's like, God, this guy just sneezed and like produced it, and it's like, what the hell, like.
How often do you think bug collision happens? Because what I found is, I think I have like 2, maybe 3 directly credited, and there was probably like 7 of them where like 4 or 5 of them, the vendor just came back and said, well, we're not going to credit you because somebody else already found this and we're in the process of fixing it. And I'm like, okay, why am I providing you a POC if you already know about it?
There was a recent like DEF CON talk of somebody that he went. Oh God, he's famous too. I feel terrible. I don't know his name. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna look this up. But he goes into like how companies will just actively look for reasons not to pay because they didn't realize how much money they would have to spend on bug. Jason Haddix.
Oh yeah.
I'll send it to you. It's a damn good talk, but it goes into like how, like some of them will be like, oh, I'll spend like 300,000 on a bug bounty program, not realizing they got to spend like more like, I don't know, a few $1 million, not because like how many vulnerabilities they have, and then they go into panic mode, thinking like, oh crap, now we can't really pay out all these people, so then they just try to actively not pay the actively pay the researchers.
Well, what was interesting is like, we were never allowed to take a bounty. So we were just disclosing them for free. And they were still kind of giving us that runaround in some cases.
Ooh, what? Wait, hold on. So you're telling them for free and
they would be like, oh, somebody's already found this, or, like, we don't consider that to be an issue, or.
What's the reward so there's no reward for you guys, or like if then I have no idea. I don't know why. Maybe they just don't want to look like.
Yeah, and ironically, a lot of times it was security vendors that were doing that, and I think it's just probably a bad look for a security vendor to get popped for a 0 day.
Was it Splunk?
No, I wish. But they were some ones you would recognize for sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but let's see. So I did read that you're writing a book.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not a technical book, first of all.
Okay.
In my career, I have encountered, and maybe I'm one of these personalities, and I just don't have the self awareness to know it. But I've encountered these personalities, especially at a leadership level, that are just, I mean, maybe borderline need some therapy situations. And kind of I had this concept or this idea of, are you familiar with like the Mexican loteria? Like the car, it's like bingo.
The game? The game? Yeah.
So it's like bingo. So my thought was to identify some of the prototypical leadership personalities and kind of write, mostly in cyber, but just in general IT, and then just in leadership, and then write kind of like a description of who these people are and what they typically do as a tactic in terms of leading, and then how to navigate dealing with those types of people.
That sounds terrific. So navigating like different types of leadership styles through organizations and how to work with them, not against them, kind of thing.
Yeah, almost like maybe like a social engineering element of how to, I guess, be successful working for those types of people.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. There's a few books that I've read. I forget, one of them's like talks about how you can associate like 4 different colors with an individual in terms of like how they work. But I don't know anyone specifically about talking about how people handle in terms of like leadership positions. That would be really interesting. That would be really good and useful. I did listen that you did read the 5 love languages as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, which one is yours?
I mean, like most men, physical touch.
Is that most men's? I don't know that.
Isn't it? I would think.
Mine's service. I don't know, man.
Really?
Someone like just does stuff for me. I'm like, thank you. This is perfect. I love this.
Acts of service.
This just feels right. And then if it doesn't happen, I'm just like, okay, it's fine. But all the other ones, I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't know. I'm fine. I don't know.
I'm a little bit of was it words of affirmation?
Yeah. I think there's like percentages and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I think it's a mix. I don't think anybody's like one all or nothing. I think it's kind of like somebody that's like trilingual or multilingual. They have a strength in their primary language and then, some competence in the others.
That's also really interesting as well. This is completely outside of cybersecurity, but in terms of psychology, like people will like, in terms of languages, like what I've heard is like you're not the personality you are with your like natural tongue or born language. Like whatever languages that you pick up, you will become almost a different personality based on the individuals and people and things that you've experienced with that language. So I've noticed like if actually for both Italian and Spanish, I'm like way more like yeah, it's fine, it's all chill, because it's just like, I don't know, it's easy to just be like, yeah, why not, kind of thing. And like I just imagine like an Italian person or like a Spaniard being like, oh yeah, it's okay, no worries, and stuff like that. Because most of the experience I've been around, if I've like, oh, I'm learning this language, like, oh, good for you. It's always nice and welcoming. So I always feel like a welcoming character or person when I speak those languages. Yeah.
Do you think that could be like a cultural adaptation part of the learning?
Oh, 1,000%. Like I'm probably just like extra mamma mia when I'm doing everything, and like everyone's like, yeah, okay, that's fine.
That's funny. That's interesting.
My wife, she speaks 6 languages, 6, I guess 5 living languages. I guess 2 of them are like dead languages, so 7 or 8 languages, and I don't know. She's really smart like that. So like she helps me.
Well, I think it's curious. I don't do a whole lot of programming. I'm not a developer, but I wonder if it's from a technology standpoint, if it's the same concept of like
it is
natural language. Like you only learn one language and then you just translate to the others.
No, it is. So like in programming languages, I know about, I can say I can read 10 of them, but like actually proficient at them, like I could write well in about 2 or 3 of them, maybe two to more closer to 2. But Yeah, it's pretty much the same in terms of like transferring like how things make sense, or even vulnerabilities as well. You realize that there's missing components of different types of language structures, as well as things that could be said, or you can't even say certain types of words or phrases because the grammatical structure, or like in programming, the syntax and structures, it's not there, or the declarations aren't there. So it opens up for different types of vulnerabilities, whether it be written, like programming, hacking, or whether it be like in spoken languages and stuff like that. So there's like some things that could be potentially lost. So when expressing like certain types of emotions or feelings, there might be those things in some languages, and other languages there's like it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Yeah, that's interesting.
Like I think the easiest example is like snow. I think like the Eskimo language, it has like it's like 20 or 40 different words for snow, while like English, it's like there's one, it's snowing. Or like hail with two, you know.
Frozen snow.
Yeah. And then of course Japanese, right? You have, this is completely on a different tangent, but yeah, Japanese, you'll have like different ways of degrees of sorry, of like depending on like how sorry you are, and then also on another like plane, like what status you are to the other individual and stuff like that. So you have to say it.
A hierarchical respect thing.
Yeah, hierarchy of respect, and then like how sorry you are as well. So it's like two different planes of one word and how it's delivered as well. So
that's good to know.
Yeah,
I'm going to Japan in January, so maybe
is it your first time?
First time.
Where are you going?
Tokyo.
Nice. It's beautiful there. It's gonna be maybe a little bit cold, but it's I loved it. It's what are you guys gonna do? What are you gonna see?
Well, MUFG is a Japanese company, so
yeah, I know, that's exciting. Are you going out there for work and everything else?
Going to the mothership, check things out, do some planning.
Are you doing red teaming? Are you kicking down doors, lockpicking stuff?
No, mostly PowerPoint.
Okay, all right, that's fun too. How long are you out there?
Like 3 weeks. So that's what's cool is like I'll have weekends.
Nice.
So I plan to just see as much as I can.
Are you gonna take the family? Or are you gonna? Are you able to take the family, or is it gonna?
I mean, I could, but it just doesn't work out with schedules and work and school But I think if I can swing a summer trip, or maybe next year like a spring break trip, we'll probably do it.
That's cool. Yeah, you should maybe even look to get property over there. I don't know if you like real estate at all, but Japan's an interesting market because they don't care about their housing too much, and it's like a cultural thing because most of their houses get broken down in like after like 15 years, usually because like a hurricane or something else. But there's a lot of abandoned houses, so like the akiyas are like really inexpensive, anywhere between less than $100,000 you get a house. So whole other book and topic there, but I have one more question, and then we can start wrapping things up because it's getting around that time. You said you don't do a lot of like coding and developing, which means you must be utilizing a lot of tools. So what tools are you utilizing that you feel are great for your guys' environment that you've liked, and other tools that you haven't, that you don't like? And then I guess the third one is like, what tools do you want to see come forward in the future?
Yeah, so I have been a longtime user of Bloodhound. So Bloodhound is an Active Directory recon tool. It, maps attack paths, right? And so in the last couple of years, they released an enterprise edition.
Is this the one that's like a VM inside of like a cloud environment where you can like run it, or is it something different? Because I did see it recently and it looks sick. It looks cool. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty close to Community Edition with like really cool features that help you more from a defensive capability. But to me, like that talk that we had about hybrid environments where you can transition from Azure to on-prem, like to me, that's one of the most valuable capabilities that it has right now. So just kind of interested in knowing and understanding that. But I think it's great for defenders, great for identity folks, but I still am a strong proponent from a red team perspective, because to me, it's kind of cheating, but it is really effective in planning ops. Because it helps me know and understand where the high value targets are, where tier 0 exists, how to get to tier 0 from low level users, who those low level users are that I want to kind of formulate my attack around. So it's almost like what I would call like an internal OSINT, so to speak. or internal recon, more so. And, then you reverse engineer that with how a threat actor would get the information, just so it's not cheating. So it's more realistic. But I really love that tool. And then, like if you're a consultant, you can get away with just using the community edition. But for internal enterprises, big plug. It's a great tool. Beacon object files to me is like that extensibility with other command and control capabilities is like pretty hot. And really what I love about it is it's kind of that modular extensibility of using existing command and control like Cobalt Strike or Mythic or Havoc or whatever. And that's where that kind of secret sauce comes in, where like you build your own kind of adventure. So I kind of love following folks like Bobby Cook and Will Schroeder and all these people that like have these really cool ideas on how they extend their C2's life by creating these different modules and capabilities with using beacon object files. In terms of red team, I think, anything evasion related is always fascinating to me because there's a lot of research that goes into that, which, is trial and error, just watching how observing how the EDR behaves and trying to work around it. Nothing specific or anyone in particular, but anyone that does research in that space, I try to follow and kind of watch what they're doing and try to understand their methodology, because that's just a level of investment that I just don't have, or the brain power probably at this point. But yeah, stuff like that is pretty fascinating. All that research stuff that gets kind of transitioned into tradecraft is kind of like, to me, like every red teamer should be doing in terms of like keeping their skills sharp.
Okay. And then I think I read somewhere where it's like it spoke about, being able to, at least when you have a payload, how to encode it, how to encrypt it, and stuff like this, and how to even write your own encryptor encoder. Would you say those are useful skills for people that are entering the red teaming environment, or do you feel like you can get away with other types of ways to make a FUD?
I'd say the window is closing more and more on that, especially when you start thinking about some of these security products that are deploying like LLM that are specific to profiling adversaries and what they've done. I still think it's a little bit of snake oil and it's got some ways to go. But I think eventually what you'll see is some of the standard stuff, especially tooling in the commercial environment or even in the open source environment, like that window is just kind of closing more and more every day. So I think that need for custom capabilities and custom injection and payload armoring and evasion, I think that is a very much a high demand skill right now. Maybe at some point AI is going to solve for that, or, I think it's always an arms race. So I think whatever the security community comes with to combat that, somebody's going to invent the next iteration to get around it. So I don't think it's a bad thing to at least know and understand how those things work. But I think definitely relying heavily on tools to do that for you, you're going to run into a window of opportunity that's starting to narrow.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. Okay, cool. And then for the C2 frameworks, is Beacon a component or is that a C2 framework?
Yeah, so Beacon is a component of typically like Cobalt Strike. Mythic also has kind of like a similar capability where you can integrate this extensibility called the Beacon object file. But Beacon predominantly comes originally from Cobalt Strike, yeah.
Okay, got it. And then is there any C2 frameworks that you like or would recommend?
So Sliver is a good one. Mythic is pretty sweet. What I like, most of these frameworks are built by operators, so that, the thing about operators is they don't always have the UI, UX in mind. But I think
I can say that for most hackers that are just building editing tools in general.
Like a product marketing research firm, to help them understand. So I think a lot of their UI UX methodology comes from what it's like to live and breathe in an op itself, like in an exercise. So what I love about Mythic is, once again, SpectreOps guys and a bunch of others collab to create that. And it really does treat the the UI with the operator in mind, in a multi-team environment as well. So I think that's pretty cool. Cobalt Strike is still pretty good. It's a true blue kind of classic, to have in your arsenal. I think, it's been studied so much that it's pretty hard to use these days because all the EDRs are kind of onto it. So you have to do a lot of custom development around it. Outflank has got a pretty cool capability, which is maybe not great for long haul operations, but it's good for like the quick smash and grab stuff. And I think that's developed by some guys in the Netherlands. So, there's definitely some European red teamers out there and researchers. They do pretty good work. And I think their specialty is also like a lot of EDR evasion. So, yeah, I think those are my top 4 or so.
And then for people that want to learn more about how to utilize these CT frameworks, the training courses that you mentioned, are those ways that they can start practicing some of those, or would they have to build up their own internal labs to be able to practice some of these things?
I know CRTO definitely has heavy focus on Cobalt Strike, which is the 0-point security. SpectreOps' RTO training, I just had my guys run through that recently. They do use Mythic, and I think you can use Cobalt Strike as well if you wanted to. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely get a lot of Mythic practice taking that class. I think having your own kind of like mini lab, at least to understand how the infrastructure works from a team server perspective, is pretty helpful. And I mean, I don't know if GCP is still offering like the $300 credits if you just drop a credit card in there. I mean, it's not hard to set up, but it's navigating and understanding the nuances of how things work. That's where the work really comes in. And it just takes muscle memory. You just have to keep doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything in hacking just takes a lot of muscle memory. So, okay. All right, great. Well, thank you so much. Did you have anything else that you'd like to do a shout out or promotion while you're here?
And it's funny because like a lot of the things that I talk about, maybe this is because, I'm just not as technical, but I think a lot of the things that I try to preach or promote are really centered around like the frameworks and understanding about how attacker mindset works and how program development works from a red team perspective. Like there's 2 really good books, and I think I've already shouted out these before in previous podcasts, but like Maxie Reynolds wrote a really cool book called The Art of Attack. And it really kind of talks about the attacker mindset from her perspective, like as a social engineer previously. She's actually really cool. She's a starter of a founder. She's a founder of a startup that does completely non-tangential. It's not in the cybersecurity, but she used to be a social engineer and red teamer. She started a company that puts data centers in the bottom of the ocean.
On the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah, it's called
Interesting.
Subsea Cloud. Might be somebody definitely I would recommend interviewing. She likes to go on podcasts and talk about
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
cool stuff.
Now that you have the shout out, I'll definitely reach out to her and say, hey, Marcus reached out and said we should connect.
And then Joe Vest and I think his name is, I have the book here, James Tuberville wrote this red team development and
Yeah, I downloaded. I mean, I bought it just because you mentioned it.
it's a good book. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're starting out or building a program, like it's almost like a Bible, so to speak. It's pretty good. And then I from a psychological and practical perspective, like, and as a researcher, you can probably relate. Like, obstacles are just part of it. It's part of red teaming. It's part of security research. That gaslighting, like, do I know what I'm doing? Like, am I even like this sucks? Like, it's like 5 months of like headbanging and then like 5 seconds of glory, right? Like, oh, and then you're on to the next problem, right? So like Ryan Holiday wrote this book called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's basically like taking like ancient stoicism and talking about like, he takes a lot of like more modern stories of people, like famous people, and how their trials and tribulations like got them to be where they are. And so I use it from a practical standpoint of like just navigating the challenges that we encounter in cybersecurity and red teaming in our careers. And it's been pretty helpful for me to kind of like develop a temperament that's more amenable to dealing with things and versus like table flipping when you get caught or, like when you can't get something working, like it's definitely something that you have to develop an acumen for. And I think that book
Definitely. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that book as well. I remember when I was like a lot younger, I would always be fearful of like if I got really angry, like what that says. But I think personally, like as you go through life and stuff like that, realizing that like failure is a part of growth, and like you need to have failure and you need to have hardships in order to grow. Because if you are comfortable, then you're just stagnant. You're not going to grow. The significant amount of growth happens when you're uncomfortable. So, I think it's actually worrying if you're more comfortable and realizing like, how could I make my life more harder in small appetites where it is, and
where it doesn't kill you.
Yeah, where it's not gonna, if it kills you, you gotta like reborn or whatever the case is. But I've definitely had like there's been moments, I think it's like when I'm drinking, like after like a DEFCON amount of drinking, after like the third day, I'm like, dude, I fucking hate drinking. Like I need to not drink or whatever. And then I have like this mentality thing where it's like, okay, cool. Like I've done that. Now I have to like mentally do some type of like achievement, whether it be like small or big, but something. So I feel better. Like my personal, like, the way I feel good about myself is by doing something of a level of achievement. So like, other people like, oh, I'll just do a Vice and stuff like that. The Vice, I get bored after like a day or two. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like I need to like just do something, like hack something or just play with something so I feel a little bit better and just like increment from there kind of thing. Cause I think that's the way to look at it. And I think the way that you present it in terms of like, addressing it with like a non-emotional like set and like, okay, this is the situation. What do we do from here? I think it's the right way to do it. And I think some people just get scared of even being in that situation where it's like, oh, I would just fall underneath this pressure, whatever the case is. And it's like, maybe you need to be in that pressure so you can like find out who you are. And if you did fall, like learn from it, because those things are like so valuable. You can get yourself in situations, and when you realize like how you handle yourself in those situations, sometimes you'll be surprised by yourself and then be proud, and then you can walk even taller.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I agree.
But yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the book suggestions. I was going to ask if you have any additional ones, whether it be psychology, cybersecurity, anything related.
Kind of I would say a companion to that book, The Obstacles Away, is another one that Ryan Holiday wrote called, this is another good one for red teamers, Ego is the Enemy. Yeah, and I think the perspective that it gives you is like, sometimes you're in your own way a lot of times, like with the idea that you either know something or that you're too good for something or, too proud to ask for help or to think about things, or, it's just sometimes that component of ego is like, I'm a big, in social engineering tactics, I use ego suspension all the time because it's pretty helpful. But, from a standpoint of like letting ego get in the way of you accomplishing things or working with others or whatever, like, man, you really have to have that in check as a red teamer, because sometimes you just have to eat shit, like it happens. But I think having the once again, the temperament to deal with that is always a good thing to develop.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mentioned like earlier about like learning and like growing and having the knowledge of other individuals and stuff like that. And I think it's like that's the summation of like your five closest friends. There's like the summation of who you are. So being and growing and being around other intellectual people, smarter people than you, like is a significant like shift of like, this is where I want to go. And like, I'm pushing myself hard. These people are even crazier. Like David Goggins, like Jesus Christ, man. Like I listen to him when I'm working out. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck am I complaining about?
His 100 ultramilers where he was like bleeding.
Ultra mega super. Yeah, he was
like bleeding
running on shitted splints.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, and I'm upset I got to go twice a week. Like, got a comfortable gym. Like, what am I complaining about? Who's going to carry the boats? You know what I mean? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Marcus. I really enjoyed having you here on the podcast, Hackers Founders. You've been a terrific guest, and would love to have you on another time as well.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to come back, check in.
All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. I hope you have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one.
All right, brother. Cheers.
Cheers.